Hello, hello. My name is Dr. Rachel Silver, affectionately called Dr. Ray, and I'm your host for the Purpose Over Passion podcast. As you see, we're in a different environment. I'm just sitting on my couch as opposed to in front of the bookshelf talking to a gentleman or two. This is just me and you having a conversation. Now, to be honest, I ran out of men to speak to. Okay, not quite. I do have a couple men who are available for their interviews after the holiday season. And I had a decision to make. Do I pause? We have Christmas and New Year's. Do I pause for the holidays, take a couple weeks break and come back? Or do we continue to have this conversation? And I prayed, and you know what? We're going to continue to have the purpose over passion conversation. Today, we are going to speak about the 10 laws of abstinence. You probably have heard me, if you've seen any of the videos, mention there are 10 areas that I really feel we need to delve into and really consider if abstinence is the choice that we are making, or if abstinence is the experience that we are embarking upon. So often, we don't process abstinence until we're in a challenge or a conflict. Then we either process it or we don't. So we process it and we're like, you know what, this is what happened. This is what I'm changing up. I'm not going to allow this. This is what I'm putting into my life. Or we don't process it. We call our friends and we cry it out and we're like, I can't believe this. And it wasn't even worth it in some cases. I hear so many things when people reach out to me, and we don't really process or consider or think about this abstinent journey until there's a challenge or a conflict. And that is a poor way to win a battle, right? We want to have the skills, the understanding, the processes, the strategies. We want to have all those things prior to dealing with a conflict or dealing with a challenge. And we don't want to just ignore and say, oh, I'm good. I've been doing this for a while. I don't need, to process it either. Because I know people who are married who had struggles because they never dealt with or address these 10 areas. So today, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek, because I do have a book that goes through these things, but I'm going to give you a little sneak peek into the 10 laws of abstinence. So that is what we will be discussing today. So number 1, abstinence as a choice, or how do we define our choice of abstinence? And this is a interesting word. I was having a conversation with my brother, and he was like, is abstinence really ever a choice? Now, this is a married man, been married a couple decades, more than a couple decades, and definitely not his journey then and not his journey now, praise God. But he was saying that, in his mindset, is abstinence really a choice, or is it a byproduct of a choice? And that's a really good point, because we've been talking about that, and how when we focus on our why, or when we focus on our reason, the choice of abstinence becomes more clear. We're not going to focus on what we're not doing, but we're successful when we focus on the things that we are doing. So the first category to process is really why. Why are you even making this choice? Why are you even making this decision in the first place? Is it because you were told you had to? Is it because mama said keep your legs closed? Is it because the church said you need to not be up in these sheets? Like, what is the reason for your choice of abstinence? And in one of my books, I actually go through some people's choices, because I've reached out to about 47 men and interviewed over 30 of them. And I realized then, people choose abstinence for different reasons, and it's not the same reason. And so that is something that you want to process for yourself. What is your choice? What is your reasoning? What is even your definition? Because if you speak to 30 people and ask them how they define abstinence, I promise you're going to get at least 3 different answers, and even how they define what abstinence is. And so for yourself, if this is a journey that you are embarking upon, or a journey that you want to understand, then this is something that you want to process and you want to sit with. What is abstinence? Why is this something that am interested in embarking upon? Or why is this something that I have embarked upon? You really want to make sure that you're processing and understanding the definition and understanding the why of your abstinence. So number 1 is the why of abstinence, or abstinence as a choice. The second area, or number 2, is setting boundaries. And I know that may seem like, oh yeah, if I'm going to be abstinent, I need to set boundaries, not put myself in certain positions, la la la. But it's so much deeper than that, because not everyone is comfortable setting boundaries. Not everyone has learned how to set boundaries. Not everyone has even known how to protect their own physical or emotional self. Especially, and I mention this a lot, especially if someone who's dealt with sexual trauma. And the reason that I mention this a lot is because we have a high percentage, especially here in America. I don't know how other countries are, but we have a very high percentage of individuals who have experienced sexual trauma. And one of the things that is a byproduct of that is the lack of boundaries. And so a lot of times when people embark upon this journey, they don't connect the two. And so setting boundaries is something that is a very important thing to begin to develop, an important thing to understand, an important thing to use. And we don't always think about it in a sexual standpoint. Some people have a problem saying no. When they are asked something, they're like, it's hard for them to say no. Sometimes that hard to say no may be hard to say no to yourself. I know I've dealt with that quite often. Like, this is something that I really want to do, or this is something that I believe in, or this is something that I like. But you can't do all of those things, or it's not healthy to do all of those things at the same time. So sometimes you have to say no to yourself and be like, you know what? In this season, this is what I'm going to do. In that season, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not just talking about sex. I'm talking about just life, whether it be employment, jobs, work, organizations, things within your purpose, just in life, learning and understanding no. Prioritization. Not everyone has the skill of how to prioritize things properly and effectively. And that can affect how we interact with our family. That can affect how we interact with our loved ones when we don't have the skill of prioritization. And it can affect even how we interact and how we take care of ourselves. All of these things, guess what, are within the category of setting boundaries. Not everyone knows how to even begin to identify or begin to categorize, are the boundaries that I set effective? Do they need to be adjusted? Do I understand why they're there? So the second area that is so important to process, that has very little to do with sex, is setting boundaries, because that's one area it helps with, but I promise you, it will help with so many other and so many different areas of life. So number one, we were talking about the choice of absence. Number two, the area is setting boundaries and really processing and really understanding where you are, where you stand, and where you desire to be in those areas. So let's go on to number three. Now, number three is very closely related to number two. Number three is expressing boundaries. And probably you're like, well, aren't setting boundaries and expressing boundaries, isn't that the same thing? And I would say, in my opinion, no, they're not exactly the same thing. Setting boundaries is more understanding how you want to prioritize things, and understanding, the importance of saying no, and understanding really how to protect your physical and emotional needs. Communicating them is a whole nother story. So expressing boundaries and actually understanding how to communicate boundaries is another skill set. There are skills within communication that we need to develop. There are assertive skills that we need to develop as well in expressing our boundaries in a healthy manner. And so this is going beyond just the decision making, but this is actually going into how do I express and how do I implement the boundaries that I have undertaken? How do I actually actualize them in real time? How do I utilize them? And so, are you standing up for yourself? Are you standing up for things that are against your values or beliefs when someone asks you to do something? Are you comfortable with your own personal space? Are you able to communicate your personal space? I've had times where people wanted to give me a hug. We was in a whole pandemic. I don't want a hug. Like, are we able to verbalize that without feeling bad about hurting someone else's feelings? How we communicate and how we allow our assertiveness to take place is an area that we really do need to process, understand, and actually gain tools and skills within. So that's number three. So number one, Are we understanding the definition and our choice of abstinence? Number 2, are we setting boundaries? What does that look like? Number 3, how do we healthily express those boundaries? Now, number four is control. And you're probably like, wait, like we talking about sex and we talking about abstinence, what that got to do with control? But really, there is a sense of control that needs to be processed and understood. If this is something that is being done for a faith-based purpose, like I'm a Christian, and so I want to glorify God with my body. Prior to being married, I know that my body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, and so this is one of the areas that I make sure that I, submit and surrender to God. And so that brings a sense of, is God in control of my life, right? But it doesn't even have to be God, for other people who may not be doing this for a religious or a spiritual purpose, just really understanding, do I have control over my impulses? Do I have control over my urges? Do I feel powerless? Like, oh, there's nothing I can do. I'm always going to fail. Or do I have the power and the authority over my own body and over my own desires as well to be implemented in a time frame and in a way that I desire and I want? And so that is an area that we have to also process in this journey of abstinence, and that is the area of control. The next area number 5, is success strategy. So let me pause for a moment. We have talked about or the areas, we're talking about the areas that I really think each person who wants to understand the abstinence journey, who wants to walk or embark on the abstinence journey, anything dealing with abstinence, I really think these 10 areas are areas that we have to process and address, and not just wait until there's a conflict or a challenge to either start processing some of them or to ignore it until the next challenge comes around, or to ignore it as if I've already overcome and this is an area I need to process, and then it comes up later, when you're married or, when you do embark upon a sexual relationship. So 1 was the definition or the understanding of your why of abstinence. Number 2 was setting boundaries. Number 3 was expressing boundaries. Number 4 was that area of control, self-control especially. And then number 5, we're going into success strategies. Now, this is where if the church or if anyone actually wants to take a step further from the just don't have sex talk, sometimes you'll find people beginning to talk success strategies, and it's mostly in the area of avoidance, like, resist the devil and he will flee from you. So just don't do it, don't go near it, don't put yourself in certain positions. It's a very avoidant conversation. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. We definitely should understand how to not place ourselves into temptation. I mean, sometimes things will come into our place and come into our environment, but we do want to, we certainly want to have some prevention and temptation prevention where we can allow, and we do want to avoid and resist things. I'm not saying that we shouldn't want to do those things, but I am saying that success strategies should also include resources. It also include support systems. Like, is there a support network available in this area of other people who are like-minded, who are also embarking on the journey and have had maybe similar or different challenges than you have? Like, is that network available? Another success strategies is like, what type of hobbies are you embarking upon? Like, what are you doing with your life, right? What's your mindfulness looking like? Excuse me. Do you know yourself? Like, do you know your triggers? Like, is it that scent? Is it what he look like? Is it that, when he touched a certain spot? Like, do you know your triggers, right? To even have the success strategies in place. And are you reviewing your life? Are you reviewing the places that you put yourself in? And are you making adjustments as necessary, right? So we also want to have some success strategies. Number 6 is managing setbacks. And in this area, this is looking at more so like your bounce back. Like, if there is a mistake or almost mistake, what is your bounce back looking like? Are you dwelling on the failure or almost failure? Are you like non-functional because you're like, How could I have? I know better than this. Or are you like, okay, bet, what can I do differently next time? How can I learn from this experience? How can I understand what got me there in the first place, or what mindset? Am I blaming someone else, or am I taking responsibility even for my own actions, or my own maybe insecurities, or my own needs and desires that I may have met in a way that wasn't the healthy way, or wasn't the way that aligned with my values and my goals? How are we managing setbacks? Do we have people that we can speak to, that we can talk to? I told you, I definitely have had multiple people calling my phone crying, and all of these different things. Do we have people that we know are not going to be judgmental about where we are in our journey, that we can have this conversation with, that understand, because maybe they have also overcome it? I always say this is probably best to have this conversation. Not to say you can't have a conversation with someone who is also struggling or also dealing with setbacks, but it is helpful to have the conversation with someone who has overcome, because they're not just like, yeah, because I was in the same place last night too, like, or whatever, but something that they may have experienced, but they have also overcome, may not have the same challenges, may have some other insights and strategies and stuff for you. But do you have that? Do you have that network, or do you have that outlet for which you can have those conversations free of judgment, with understanding, but also with accountability? So managing setbacks, that's an area that is very important when we are embarking on this journey. All right, so let's move to number 7. And again, there are 10 areas that I really, really, really highly encourage anyone who is abstinent, embarking upon an abstinent journey, or even want to understand it more. There are 10 areas that I really think should be processed. And if you can be quite frank, all of these areas can help in multiple areas of life. So even if sexual abstinence or sexual discipline isn't the area that you're looking into, these are 10 areas that are going to be very helpful for you, that can overflow in many areas of life. So you can definitely go through them as well. So number 1 was our why, like what's the definition and the choice of abstinence. Number 2 was setting boundaries. Number 3 was expressing boundaries in a healthy manner. Number 4 was control, self-control, understanding what that is and what that looks like in our life. 5 was success strategies that aren't just avoidance and fleeing. Number 6 was managing setbacks. Number 7 is future and outlook planning. So often when things don't happen in a time frame that we would like them to happen in, or that we expected them to happen in, our future planning sometimes gets a little delayed, sometimes gets a little pushed under the carpet, sometimes gets a little deprioritized, because we're maybe not having the positive outlook that we once had, or that we should have, or anything like that. So what are our plans looking like? Are we, instead of looking at, well, this isn't available, or this isn't there, what is available? What are we doing with our current resources, even in this area of future outlook and of future planning? Or is it just negative? Well, it's useless. There's no one else that's going to understand. I don't have any, going back to control, I have no control over my life. Or are you positive? Are you looking at future goals? Are you looking at, a God, or whatever reason you're choosing? But like for me, are you looking at, like, I serve the God of miracles. Like, I serve a great and wonderful, absolutely amazing Father who loves and cares for me. So why would I not think that I would be like, why would I not think that what God has put into my heart is not available to me? That doesn't even make sense logically. Although sometimes if we're not careful, we can get into that place, which is another category, but we can get into that place and it halt the future planning, the purpose, the things that God has given us to do outside of this area. And so we want to definitely take a moment to really consider our planning and our processing. I was the kind of person who I had many, many plans. And I remember looking and seeing, I was looking at an old plan I had written. It was a 3-year, 5-year, I think 10 and 25-year plan. I was reading and was like, this is the vow that I made over my life, that I was like, this is why this ain't happening, because this is what this is when I said it was going to happen. Like, I made these vows for my life without, resetting and going back to the plan, and had gotten to a place where I was like, I'm just not going to plan. And it was subconscious. It wasn't, I wasn't like stagnant and not doing anything in any area of my life. But in this area, because I didn't really feel I had the level of control, or because I can only do what I can do, I can't control someone else, I stopped planning. And that is not acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable. So really having that future outlook and that future planning is important, even if the time frame, doesn't is not in the time frame that you want, because there are some actions also that we need to be doing. So like, if you think of a strategic plan, or you think about planning, it's the plan, but then there's tasks and action steps that need to happen to really fulfill the plan. And if we're not looking at the future, or we're not looking at the outlet, and we stop taking those action steps, then we are creating an area, we're creating a zone, whether it's a vow that we create for ourselves that prevents the thing that we're saying we desire, or we're not taking the steps or the actions or doing the things that we need to do in order to get the things that we desire, because we stopped planning, we stopped looking at the future, we stopped assessing, and we stopped making adjustments as needed. All right, I'm gonna get off that soapbox. Number 8, belonging. Is there a sense of belonging? Do you feel accepted? Do you feel a connection? Do you feel like, oh, I just don't fit in with people, or I feel left out, I don't really feel included? That sense of belonging area is an area that needs to be processed, especially for someone who is choosing an abstinence journey. Whether it's with family or with friends or community, if that sense of connection is not there, then this is certainly an area that we need to really focus in on. And I have a sexual abstinence inventory that I usually use with one-on-one with people. It's about 100 questions, and it helps me identify the area that they may not be the strongest in, so that we can help to cultivate and develop that area more. But belonging is definitely one of them. Having that feeling of acceptedness, that feeling of connection, whether it be with family, friends, or community, is very, very important in the area of abstinence. So if you're feeling like, I just don't fit in, or I'm kind of left out of stuff, I'm not included in stuff, this is really an area to lean into for those who are abstinent. So we're talking about the 10 areas that I really think every person in the world should look at, but definitely every person embarking upon an abstinent journey, or that wants to understand success strategies for abstinence, should really look into. Number 1 was understanding the why of abstinence. So what is abstinence? How am I defining it? What is my purpose for it? Why is it? What is it a byproduct of? Whatever. Why am I absent? So 1, that needs to be processed. 2, setting boundaries, making sure that we have boundaries in place, not just setting boundaries, understanding that we're comfortable with our boundaries and protecting our physical and our emotional needs, being able to say no, being able to prioritize, all of those things. And then number 3 is expressing those boundaries in a healthy manner. Am I able to communicate properly? Do I have assertiveness techniques? Am I comfortable with identifying and expressing what my personal space and my personal needs are in any arena? Am I okay even with ending relationships when they need to be ended? That's a whole nother one. But, am I standing up for myself? Am I, just this whole area of expressing boundaries healthily. Number 4 was control. Do I feel like I have control over my life, or have I surrendered that control even to God? Do I feel like God has control over my life, or do I feel powerless? Like, what is, the control area, looking at how is my self-control? Am I able to control my sexual urges or my sexual impulses? Number 5 was success strategies. Definitely resisting the devil and allowing him to flee from you, but also making sure we have the resources and the support network and our hobbies and our mindfulness, making sure all of that is in place. Number 6 was managing setbacks. And in managing setbacks, making sure, yes, we have support, but also, are we looking at this as a failure that causes me no function? Or are we looking at this like, okay, what can I do differently? Like, how can I learn from this experience so that I don't keep putting myself in the same position? How do I take accountability and not just blame, others? Number 7 was future outlook and future planning. Am I planning for my future, even if the future time frame that I thought something would have happened hasn't happened yet? Am I actually looking at, my future planning? And number 8 is belonging. Do I feel accepted? Do I feel included? Do I feel connected with family or friends or community? Number 9, and I promise you, most of the things I've done, whether it be like a workshop or something, this is probably the one that most people are most intrigued with or most interested in, want to know more about. This is the one that people ask most questions about when they're embarking on this journey. So number 9 is non-sexual intimacy. What does non-sexual intimacy look like? Who, at what level, what are the levels of non-sexual intimacy at different levels of relationship? This is very important. Do you believe that intimacy can increase without sex? Is that something in your mindset that you understand? Are you connected to, or do you understand the importance of emotional connection? Do you feel fulfilled in intimacy outside of sex? Do you what physical touch is appropriate at different levels of relationship, and do you feel like that can be fulfilling? And if not, why not? Or if so, how is that implemented? Or is it, that's just for the kids? Or what is your mindset and your understanding of non-sexual intimacy? Also, even and this can kind of cross over in a couple categories, but I think it's really also important to understand hormonal release, because there are certain hormones that are released during sex that are very healthy. And if we are not aware of what they are and ways that they can be released, then we can get caught up in one or two things. One, we've trained our body not to release them, so we're not experiencing them, and we don't realize the other areas in our life and that they are not being utilized in. Or number 2, we look, hormones is hormoning, and I don't know what to do with all of this because we haven't been able to release them properly. So I do think that we also want to talk a little bit about hormones, and this is even helpful, outside, like when people are married, or when people are having sexual relationships, because that can absolutely affect their sex life. And so if you're not understanding hormones and hormonal balances now, you might have some issues later. And so I think this is definitely an area that we should discuss. And then number 10 is motivation. What's my motivation? And I know this kind of goes along a little bit with some of the other categories, but it's really going into that positive mindset understanding. What is my mindset? Am I living a satisfied and fulfilled life now? Or do I feel like, I ain't having no sex, I'm not happy, I just, this is just a hot mess? Or do you have some motivation like, I'm avoiding a distraction because I have a purpose and a plan for my life, and I'm not going to allow anything to get in the way of my goals and my values. I am motivated in this thing. Where's your mindset? And so that's the 10 areas. So thank you for rocking out with me. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do any of these areas resonate with you? Have you ever processed or thought about any of these areas in the past? Or is this something new? Like, oh, I never thought about, I just made a choice and I just kept it moving. Or I know someone who made the choice and kept it moving. Have you really ever considered these 10 laws of abstinence? Have you really considered these 10 areas? And I'll go through them once again before logging off. Number 1, why in the world am I doing what I'm doing? What is abstinence and the choice of abstinence? So what is that looking like? Number 2 is setting boundaries. Number 3, expressing those boundaries in a healthy manner. Number 4 is control, and I have self-control and I have control over my life, or I've surrendered that control to God. Number 5 is managing setbacks. God loves you no matter what you do, but you want to learn from what you do, and even if it's an expression of your love to God, you want to learn from those setbacks and know how to move differently next time. Number 6 I'm sorry, I mixed that up. Number 5 was success strategies. Number 6 is managing setbacks. So for success strategies, I kind of skipped that one. That was not just avoidance, but also, what are my resources? What are my support networks? What are my hobbies? What is my mindfulness? What are some of the things that I can do and understand? Do I know my triggers? So that was success strategies. So that was 5 and 6 were inverted just now. Number 7, your future outlook, your future planning. Are you pleased with your life? Do you have a positive outlook? Are you adjusting plans as needed? Do you still have future goals? Are you making sure that you're taking the steps that need to be taken in order to come to the outcomes that you desire? Or are you just pushing them under the rug because your time frame passed and you're like, what's the point, right? So we got to process that area. Number 8 is belonging. Do you feel accepted, connected, and included with family or friends, or at least a community of some people? Number 9 is non-sexual intimacy. Are you fulfilled with emotional connection or non-sexual physical touch, and in what areas and what arenas are we allowing that, and are we expressing and exploring that non-sexual intimacy, and even going into our hormonal releases? And then number 10, last but not least, is what is the motivation? So motivation for the abstinence journey. Do you have a positive mindset? Are you satisfied? Are you happy? Are you like, listen, we gonna get these goals and values done. This is for a purpose, and I'm all for it until the time is right, because I am purposed over passion. All right, so that's the 10 areas of abstinence. I definitely, maybe I'll break down some of them a little bit more. I do have a book coming out this 2025 in regards to this, so definitely keep an eye out. On February 1st, we have the Purpose Over Passion Summit in person right here in Dover, Delaware. And so by all means, bit.ly/purpose over passion, get your tickets, come join us. We're going to have some fun. We're going to have some great conversation. We have David Burris. He is an absolute expert coach and speaker. Very authentic and very insightful. We have Ajane Nibaye. He is an absolute excellent coach as well. He's going to get you focused on what we need to be focused on as opposed to focus on what we're not doing, because we ain't got time to be focusing on what we're not doing. I'll also be speaking. We are going to have such an amazing time. We're going to have fun. We're going to have conversation. We're going to have some food as well. And we're going to have, community, like-minded people coming together to not just talk about, why I'm not having sex or that I'm not having sex, but to really come together and really to build each other up in multiple areas that can overflow into multiple areas of our life. So come out, join us. We'd love to have you a part of this Purpose Over Passion journey. You have a wonderful day. Be blessed. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.